Hello, my name is Dr. Dervila McCann. I'm a cardiologist and Chief of Population Health at Central Maine Medical Center in Lewiston, Maine. When I moved here years ago, I began seeing patients who had heart attacks at a very early age, and I learned that they had a condition known as familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH for short. This is a commonly inherited genetic condition leading to early heart disease. When I spoke to my colleagues who've been practicing here for many years, they described to me the devastating consequences of this disorder, particularly in the days before we had good treatments.
When I was 10, my cholesterol was about 350.
I knew that I probably had a problem when I was younger because my dad told me that I had a problem with it, but I completely ignored it. Felt like it's not going to take me down, you know what I mean? So I was, I didn't take any meds. I didn't really go to the doctors too much until my mid-30s also. I was 34. I had a heart attack, pretty good sized one.
We really got serious about getting the family tested when Carl had his heart attack. So I have been on medication since I was 10 years old.
After my brother had his episode, which he didn't mention, it was a quintuple bypass surgery, so he needed 5 bypasses. That was an eye-opener for me to spend some time with him the day after his surgery.
Although FH is found in every ethnic group and every country around the world, certain ethnic groups have this disorder more frequently than others. One such group is Franco-Americans, particularly here in the New England area. To understand why this disorder is seen more frequently here, you need to learn a story that links geography, history, public health, and genetics. The great rivers of New England. These great arteries have served as a source of food and water, transportation, and power, shaping the history of the people of the region. Water power from these rivers was the natural resource that centered the textile manufacturing of the U.S. Industrial Revolution in New England. Throughout the 1800s, mills sprang to life from Maine to Connecticut, and the need for skilled laborers grew. Many workers for the factories and mills of New England came from America's northern neighbor, Canada. In particular, the French Canadians, who were descendants of the original founders of Quebec, were drawn to the work in the textile mills of the northeastern states, where they were offered high wages and predictable employment. In the 1850s, a wave of immigration to America began, eventually leading to more than 200,000 French Canadians leaving Canada. River travel made way to a railroad system from Quebec through New England. Several enterprising businessmen raised money to build a short addition to the railroad system, enabling the immigrants to end their journey close to the mills, like this one in Lewiston, Maine, where a small rail depot sits just next to the large Bates textile mill. This was one of the very first stops on the way south from Quebec, and thousands disembarked here, staying in this region of central Maine for the remainder of their lives. A particularly strong Franco-American presence was established in the New England region and persists to this day. Often, one family member, such as a father, would begin work and then send for his family, who were also able to work at the mills. Child labor was considered a necessity, particularly in the weaving of cotton, where any break in the thread would shut down the weaving machine. The broken threads had to be hand-tied in order for the work to start again, and the smaller hands of women and children were better suited to this task. Sharing a common language, faith, and history, the Franco-Americans often lived in close-knit communities called Little Canadas near the factories that employed them.
I was coming down the one-way street on Oxford Street, and I saw the lady was sitting on the stoop, and it reminded me because I have relatives that lived on Lincoln Street, so we played in Little Canada when I was little. And so when I was coming down the street, she recognized me, and I saw her get up, and I said, she turned around, she went, "Hey, Louise!" And I thought it was so funny. It brought so many memories because that's how they used to communicate. Louise lives on the 3rd floor, and I remember they used to talk to each other from window to window over the street You know, t'as-tu du sucre? J'ai besoin, t'as pas faire une tarte, you know, and, you know, so they brought the sugar over and stuff. And so it was really interesting, you know.
The work was difficult, in conditions that we now recognize as unhealthy and unsafe. Though the work was hard, family and social support was strong and large families were common, their health considered a blessing. There is a French saying, lose your language, lose your soul. And though the language lived on in the large Franco-American communities, speaking French came with a price.
Well, of course, we went to French school only, which was St. Peter's and St. Paul's School and so on. We only started learning in school English around the 3rd grade, only one class.
I have a brother. I had a brother. He's passed away now. Who's only 15 months younger than I. And in high school, the French kids had to stick together because you weren't allowed into the clubs. And
in the 1950s, the Ku Klux Klan had a large membership in New England. Their activities targeted Franco-Americans who had held on to the culture that made them distinct from the English-speaking Americans. Despite hard work and prejudice, French-speaking descendants of the original founders of Quebec continued to work and live in the industrial centers and handed down their unique culture, Catholic religion, and language to their children. In 1900, the average life expectancy in the U.S. was only 46 years for men and 48 for women. Over the next 100 years, due in large part to public health improvements and an understanding of the cause of infections, life expectancy became much longer. During that period, it became more evident that culture was not the only thing handed down to the new generations. As the general population lived longer, it became obvious that the Franco-Americans had a high rate of heart attacks, often at an early age. It was not until the late 1900s, however, that the reason for this was revealed. It was found in a gene that caused high cholesterol levels. Many Franco-Americans have this form of genetic heart disease called familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH for short. Cholesterol is a building block for many important body functions. The molecule circulates in the bloodstream and it goes throughout the body, but when it is present in too high levels, it can become embedded in the walls of the arteries, causing thickening and blockages. This is the cause of most heart attacks and strokes. Cholesterol is produced by the liver and recycled there too. Ordinarily, there are receptors on the surface of the liver cell that attach to the LDL cholesterol, allowing it to be taken up by the liver and recycled. But in FH, that process is disrupted, and the damaging LDL cholesterol accumulates in the blood vessels. Unfortunately, only about 10% of individuals who have FH are diagnosed. This film has been made to increase awareness of the disease and to encourage doctors to think about this diagnosis when they see high cholesterol in their patients, and to encourage them to screen family members. If you have FH, there are a lot of things you can do. If you smoke, set a quit date. A low cholesterol diet and physical activity are very important, but probably not enough to control your cholesterol levels. There are many options available to you now, and I encourage you to ask your physician about what choices you have. I would like to thank my friends at Museum LA, at the Franco-American Heritage Center, and at the University of Southern Maine, who generously contributed their time and have allowed us to use their archival photos for this film. For more information about familial hypercholesterolemia, I'd urge you to consult the websites of the American Heart Association and the FH Foundation. To my friends, the volunteers at the Franco-American Center, I'd also just like to say au revoir and merci beaucoup.